Well, well, for the 11 people that are here, I'd like to read something to you. And this is something that I have historically been able to read. It's a poem that I've read for over 40 years to people voluntarily cornered or not. Anyway, I'm going to share it with you. It says, now we are outside in spring. These people who made it through winter sit together and talk. You see them. They have many stories. They rub their hands and sing, we rub hands. We rub winter out of our hands. Now we are outside in spring. These people who made it through winter walk together. See them. They stop to rub their feet and put them on each other's bellies for the warmth there. And they sing, we rub feet. We rub winter out of our feet. This happens each spring. Anyway, I just think that's the greatest picture of people emerging from spring, coming out, taking care of each other, finding themselves in community. And in a lot of ways, I feel an emergence, not just from spring, but just from some of the winter that we've been through lately. People are peeking out from underneath rocks and climbing down from trees and things. So anyway, I'm glad to be here with you. Welcome. I'm glad to see 11 people interested in the topic. This is something that has been really important to me. Real quick, I'll just start. I'll introduce myself a bit. My name is Dan Mahon. I washed up on the shore of the Chesapeake Bay in a clump of seaweed many years ago. I'm a person who was deeply touched by a place. And as a result, I've carried that place with me through my life. I grew up on 6 miles of rural beach down on the Chesapeake Bay that was mostly salt marsh and mosquitoes, but a place that was really unique. Culturally, natural heritage and cultural heritage. It was just a really rich place to be a feral, free roaming kid. And that the journey from that place and what I learned from there and what where I found myself going with that experience led me to working in art, studying art. My canvas got bigger and bigger, fell off the page, and became landscape. And I, found landscape architecture. It was perfect because it involved working with place and people. I really consider the work I do as placemaking. So I'm recently retired. I don't know who I am now, but I spent 25 years as the Greenway Blueway pioneer for Albemarle County. When I came on board, there was the Greenway concept was put into the comp plan, and there was no one to champion it at the time. I was in community development, looked and said, this is the greatest thing going. How do we put it on the ground? And I carried the plan from community development to parks, where I've lived with it since then. And I've been involved in acquisition, planning, acquisition, the whole gambit, managing volunteers, building, promoting, just everything, because we had no problem. It was nothing there before. So where I want to start with this, the Rivanna River, it was a significant piece of the county's overall Greenway, Blueway plan. Our original plan in 1990, the late 1990s, was more geared towards, is more of a green infrastructure plan as opposed to, right now there's a lot of discussion, a lot of shifting of the term greenways to mean urban bikeways, linking neighborhoods, and all of that was part of it. But the real emphasis, the thing that really drove the original plan was riparian, acquiring, preserving riparian corridors. It just happened that a trail was part of that. It was as much a resource protection management plan, and because it was so early on, the concept as it developed, it was easy to say that these riparian areas, creeks and rivers, are leftover places because we had ordinances that gave buffer, and so we knew that there would be space available, and so that's what I jumped out of the gate working on, and the Rivanna River became a big part of that. The Rivanna River was, I want to say it was the first, but I think it's the second. There's some debate about whether the first scenic river in Virginia. I think it's probably the second, but it's nice to say the first. It's an important river historically. I originally the Rivanna was considered part of the James River, which has a lot more history and a lot more known about it in our history. It's actually a branch of the James that later changed to Rivanna. Was named after Queen Anne, who never saw it. They got to name places they never saw. Prior to that, there was a long history of some fairly large indigenous settlements. What's fascinating there is that there are settlements that are shown on maps that Captain John Smith drew, but he never saw those areas. It was word of mouth from friendly local indigenous people that were communicated that. And it's fascinating to me how accurate those maps are, that there was an ability to communicate places and bends in the river and forks. You look at it and you can overlay a contemporary map, and the alignment is pretty amazing that they could do that. So there's a history of the Monacan people here, the Saponi, the Tutelo, a number of folks along there. But I guess historically the big deal was, of course, Peter Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson's dad, George Rogers Clark, living in that area. And so it sort of became a cradle of Western civilization, as I like to think of it, like the Euphrates or something. There was just a lot happening in this area. I mean, Thomas Jefferson skinny dipped there. I know he did, and these people that were a big part of the, our history played and worked along that river. So there's that piece of it. And then Charlottesville developed, University of Virginia. There was some industry along the river, but there was mostly just mills. And soon after the railroad came through, really the industrial aspect of the river stopped, and it was pretty abrupt. There was a history of canal boats for a while. A lot of what I've been doing is finding those old canal routes and turning them into trails, preserving them. So what we have currently is a river that's sort of been encapsulated by history, there's a lot of sections of the Rivanna that you go down and you realize, nothing has happened here since the railroad came through. Agriculture's continued, but really little has changed. In the urban area, the urban section, what happened there, and this is unique because I know there are folks from many different river communities here. We've been looking for river communities cohorts similar to ours to look at as we plan our urban section. What model, who's done anything like this before, similar, and at least here in Virginia, there aren't any good examples of river corridor development that you see in Richmond, for instance, or Roanoke, Fredericksburg. Most of those projects were the result of storm water or storm management, Army Corps of Engineer, flood control. Our river, the Rivanna, has got a floodplain that functions just the way it's supposed to. However, because there was once industry there were mills and everything, the zoning has evolved that along the urban interface with the river are contractor yards, light industry, a lot of trucks parked and materials stored. It's not like, Richmond had some interesting industrial ruins from the Civil War and different eras. Lynchburg has been able to take a whole warehouse area that was down by the river and transform it. We don't have that kind of infrastructure. It's just contractors' yards mostly. There is one building that was a mill that made Civil War uniforms, was there for a long time, it's still there. That's actually becoming the anchor to the downstream section of this urban river corridor because it exists. It's recently been transformed. IT companies have moved in, some really nice restaurants. It's really that's the one opportunity we had. The rest of the urban corridor are shopping centers, contractors' yards. Everyone has their butts hanging over the river, dumpsters. As I was acquiring land for the Greenway, a business came in and within weeks they were throwing tires down the side of the hill. They didn't have any idea. There was no concept that the river corridor had any real value. So I've been involved for years. I've been sitting at round tables and various gatherings of very knowledgeable folks interested in the health of the river, managing the development around it and everything. But what I kept seeing was that there was a large constituent, there was a large part of this community that just wasn't showing up to those conversations. Technical reports would go out regularly, but there's a certain audience for that. But I kept thinking, if we're going to get the constituents, if we're going to get the political will, if we're going to get the community to gather around this river, we've got to do more than have water quality reports, because they're not going there, they're not interested, and historically there are people who fished it, but there were very few. I used to put on the river and paddle upstream a couple miles and fly fish down, and I'd pass maybe one person in the whole day. It was very quiet, and yet it was right in the backyard of a really dynamic community. So I started looking at this, thinking, how can we enchant the community with this? bring them to the river. Do you have a copy of what I sent? Can you put that up?
Yeah, James, if you could share your screen, that would be great.
Yeah, the Rivanna River Renaissance was just a term that just came to my head. It rolled real well, and it seemed also to define where we were with things. So we all go down to the river to pray. We all go down to the river to play, but we don't show up when it comes to planning. And this is what became of interest to me. So I have been aware in the background that in Europe and in various places around the country and in the art world, there were some really interesting things happening. And I noticed one of the sessions was on art and science. There's some fascinating projects that were happening while I was in graduate school, actually, and that where artists were actually partnering with scientists to say, how can we do something here that takes the whole conversation of the science into another place. And the first one that really struck me was a project in Yugoslavia where and I wish I don't have the artist's name with me, but there was a really terribly polluted river, and what the artists did was they got together with the folks that were concerned about the river, the scientists, the people who are analyzing the poisons and what was happening there, and they did these really compelling, really incredible aerial imagery and blew them up quite large. That just had, as any of you who work with GIS and everything, every now and then you'll look at the maps and go, wow, that is just a beautiful abstract piece of art. So what they did, instead of taking the issue, the conversation to City Hall or to the government to present it, it was presented in a gallery as like a gallery opening, and the reception, the interest, the way it resonated with the community was just way above what you would have had if it were another item on a political, a town agenda. And I was just really impressed with that project. And then there were some others. There was, I think, one famous one. I think it was the Chattanooga River. Someone did what's called the River Rollade, very acidified river. And they just made these giant discs, alkaline discs, and did a performance piece of dropping these giant rollades into a river. I don't know how effective that was, but symbolically and just the whole act of doing that was something that really engaged people. And there were more. Uh-oh, I just had friendly dogs running the house here. I'm okay. That was close. So there are numerous projects, again, mostly in Europe. Artist Miro Euclides sent barges down the river with gloves from the workers from a toxic plant upstream, just as a massive demonstration, just to show that upstream this is going on. And so with that in the background, for the decades that I've been working on the river, I was really inspired by those projects, and I kept thinking, well, you know, how can we bring something like that here? And especially when the river, this new river corridor study came out, and I was realizing, sitting there going, you know, the artists, the poets, the people who have the heart for this place, they're not at the table. Not that there wasn't a lot of good input into the plan. It's just that the value of the river was more, I think, than what was going into the plan. And so I met with an old friend who is a curator of a gallery in town, and told her about it. She had a great deal of experience. As a matter of fact, this could not have happened without her relationship, her knowledge, her skill with understanding the artist community, understanding how to get the funding, the support, and everything. So we partnered on it, and she sort of helped enable this vision that I've been holding on for so long. But it was remarkable. The first year we did it, we didn't advertise it too much. We had no idea what our carrying capacity was, what could be done with it. If you slide down the images a little bit, if you could scroll down some. I will say, before we get to that, this next section here, I did want to talk a little bit about aesthetics, and how important just the aesthetics, the beauty, this is something I put together after a flood down along the river, and I was wandering around looking at the flood damage, and suddenly I felt like I was walking in a gallery. Just the crazy juxtaposition, the crazy impact, it was just so rich in drama and everything. I set up this gallery idea, and I really wanted to invite people to walk these floodways and to see the impact, to see that this is what a floodplain does. This is natural. This is not a trauma. This is not a horrible thing, but this is a process that goes on forever. And as a designer, for me, a lot of the challenge has been, how do you design in a landscape that is this dynamic, this dangerous to itself? But you can scroll on down. There's a few more of these images, I think. Yeah, if you could, yeah. All right, well, here's a second. You can stop there for a second, because this is another project I worked on. Sorry, it seems to be clunking. The Monacan Indians, they, with a long history there, I was involved, actually before I came to Parks and Rec, I was involved with a community art project that where artists were asked to represent the Jefferson's era. And when I started working on it, I started thinking, you know, well, the Jefferson era was also the era, this is when the Jefferson area began, the Monacans place there ended, or was ending. And so I went to the tribal council and sat with them and met with them a number of times, saying, what can we do out there that would be significant and compelling to tell the story. I worked with the ceremonial chiefs. We found a site and actually laid out about a couple thousand plastic toy Indian figures, all set up in colored in the 4 directions. In sort of there was a labyrinth that represented the river coming to this big circle, where the circle represented the community. I have to say, one of the park employees came by and he saw it and he said, "I don't know, Dan, I don't know about art." He said, "But that looks like a big giant sperm up there on the hill." Because it had this long winding tail leading to this big circular spot. It's that for the whole summer there. And you have to understand that the little plastic toy Indian figures had "Made in China" written on the bottom, and they were all savages. And the only way this piece worked was the whole tribe came down, got off a bus, and stomped them into the ground with a dance. And the 2 things happened. One, they were burying the myth of the savage, hostile Indian toy. And they were also demonstrating that they were there, that they were in the community. Many people have no idea that the Monacan people are still around. And recently they've gotten federal recognition as a tribe, which has been great. But for a long time, they were unknown and actually ostracized in a lot of ways. So this was that sort of cultural relationship to the river placemaking project. You can slide on up. If we could go to the next image, yeah. Yeah, myth fixing and placemaking at the stomping grounds. Yeah, stop here. All right, this was that was the second year. We started in 2017, 2018, and 2019. So started cautiously, inviting artists to come. The intent was to bring the artist community, musicians, dancers, everyone there for one day. The work was all to be ephemeral, if possible, made with invasive plants, things that were on site, and to demonstrate that issue. But the turnout, the artist community turnout and interest was huge. It was just really dynamic and very exciting. This is a ukulele army that showed up, and the people walking through the middle look a little bit frightened, but it was a pretty safe group. So a very diverse group of folks turned out each year. And actually the group that came out the first year, they were so committed to it. They said, "We're going to do this every year." Here's where the beauty of it is for me. As this was going on, I was just sort of randomly going around and interviewing people that were turning out. We had a great turnout. And 89%, it was like this huge amount of people that had no idea that there was a public trail corridor through there, well established. It's actually ADA compliant. Had no idea that there was access to the river, had not been down to see the river. And some of these were people who have been in the community for many, many years. Now, the one thing that I've also been aware of is that the constituent, the folks that support our local artists, many of them are really well involved, well engaged, deeply rooted in the community. And just to see them show up and suddenly realize, wow, this is an aspect of the community that we didn't know about. We didn't know it was happening. That was the beauty of the whole thing. That's where it just really resonated, and I saw the huge value of it. And I know that, you know, San Antonio, Chattanooga, there are river festivals in many places. I mean, Europe, my gosh, there are some incredible events along the river there. But again, those are all very different types of rivers. People know them. There are restaurants there. This is a section of river that while it's rustic, primitive, down along the corridor, there's auto dealerships and a cacophony of noise just above that's oblivious to what's happening down here. And that was the great affirmation. You can slide on down.
Dan, just to give you a heads up, we have about 5 minutes left.
Oh, no. All right. Well, what I would like to do, because I don't know who's here and who may have questions, but I'd love to hear, you can just scroll through the pictures, and I'd love to hear questions.
Yeah, if folks have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask, or you can always type them into the chat box.
I have a question, Dan.
Yeah.
This Cornerstone area we're talking about that has the restaurants now and the IT places, how close to that is that to the Walking Mall area of Charlottesville?
It ties into it. It's fairly close. There are bike ped connections being put together, but it's not right there. You know, if you were to park and say I'm in the downtown mall, it's a ways down to the river from there. But
Yeah,
there is there's more student housing. There's more, that whole area is being developed in a way that is becoming really bike friendly destination. But no, it's not right exactly there.
I live in Arizona, but 10 years ago and for 30 years before that, I lived in the Fredericksburg area mostly. And we would go down to Charlottesville, and I never thought of it as a river town. I'm glad to hear it's changing.
Yeah, actually where this Woolen Mills is, where this project is, was a port. It was called the Port Pierres. It was a port town at one point, which is amazing to think about. But there were regularly canal boats that would come up there and take goods to Richmond. And there were some locks. When you go down, for me, when I close my eyes, I hear the ghost of the sound of what that place might have sounded like. But again, it was a brief window, because as soon as the railroad came through, it just sort of vanished. And yeah, well, cool. No, it's becoming more and more walkable, and there's more of a destination when you get there.
It's good to hear.
Yeah. Thanks for your question. Anybody else got anything? Hello?
I think we have time for about one more question if anyone else has a question. These photos are fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Great to see all these installations.
If there are no questions, one thing I'd like to say for anyone who is thinking about doing something like this, the big challenge is we were going to have a boat parade come down. First year we did. Second year, 2 days before the event, there was a foot of water through the whole area. It flooded. And then the following year, the bacterial count was so high, we just didn't want people to get into the water because it was in sort of a harmful category. So there are factors unknown, or factors to consider in your planning for something like this that are very different than if it were just in an urban space. But yeah, 2 days before, and it was totally flooded. I was about ready to cry. But the artists came out and they're like, hey, we're working with this. This is cool. But yeah, COVID certainly shut us down last year. And now that I'm retired, I really want to focus more on this type of project, not only here, but in other parts of the county, and sort of revealing some of the cultural heritage and natural heritage. But yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dan. And again, if folks have additional questions, you can find Dan's contact information in Guidebook. I do want to give folks some time. We have a closing session in the James River Room. If you click on that link in Guidebook to wrap up today. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, folks. See you out there on the water.
Thank you. Hope so.